you came to your career and calling as an artist, a designer, author, maybe a little bit later than some of us do, or or we think we're supposed to. Did you have to overcome any thinking at the beginning, like why bother? It's too late.
Yes. I mean, I think I lived most of my life kind of wanting to do really cool things, but thinking that it was too late, like even in my 20s. Like I think, we're obsessed with it. Seems silly to me now. I just turned
Yeah.
54 and like I think back to being in my late 20s and wanting to do things, but thinking I was too old then, and which is so ridiculous to me now. But we live in this culture that's super obsessed with youth and doing things by the time you're 30, whether it's a career move or an athletic pursuit or whatever. And I spent a lot of time like dreaming, but never doing. And
Mm.
so when I finally gave myself permission to start something in my 30s, um, it was scary because, I had spent all of this time in my life like avoiding that. And I think what happened for me is that I went through this transformation where I was healing from a lot of heartbreak and what in the old days we used to refer to as low self-esteem, like I didn't think very highly of myself. I had, so in the beginning, I did have a lot of like imposter syndrome, and that actually got worse when my career started to blow up. In the beginning, though, I was definitely, having all of the usual feelings that you would have, starting something that you have no training for at 34, like, who am I to do this? And is anyone ever going to pay attention? And, um, so I think I sort of downplayed it in the beginning, like this is just a hobby. This is just what I'm doing for fun. And then we'll see where it goes. Um, and then as I mentioned, some of that really intensified once things did start moving for me, like, oh, now people are paying attention. I really shouldn't be doing this, right? Really, like, who am I really, So yeah, all the usual doubts. I have become in my 50s a very confident, grounded person, but it really has been an evolution for me. I haven't always felt this way in my body and in my spirit and all of that.
God, no, me neither.
Yeah.
Me neither. I'm like, I try really hard not to fall into the conversation. It took you until you were 59 to figure out fill in the blank. And
Yep.
I'm just like, well, thank God you're figuring it out now.
Right.
So this fascinating that as you started to have some success, that you found those voices growing louder. Did anything help you with that? Were you starting to have a community that helped you, or was it just there's a volume of work now that I've got to keep up with?
Yeah. All those things. One of the first things I remember that helped me shift into like, this isn't really real, this is a story you're telling yourself,
Mhm.
is that I had been in, this is when I want to say this is about 10 years ago. I was giving a studio tour when I lived in California to a group of design students. They might have been illustration students from California College of the Arts. And they came to, I gave a little talk, and and I started talking about the fact that I was sort of like racked with imposter syndrome because, unlike them, I hadn't gone to school.
Uh-huh.
And I remember the teacher of the class was this a lot of art schools hire like adjunct faculty
Mhm.
who are professionals out in the world. Like that's what I do now. And he was this pretty well-known, pretty famous designer, super nice guy. I don't even remember his name, but I remember he said, "Oh, that never goes away. Like, we all feel it." And I was like, "Wait, what? You, like, this white cisgender male, like, you who's super successful, you experience imposter syndrome? Like, you pinch yourself every day because you're in this world?" And I didn't say those words to his face, but I just remember, like, I don't know, it was kind of comforting for me to hear that
Sure.
it was like completely normal. And I had really, in reality, had nothing to do with one's skill set or experience. It's just like, that's what we feel. We feel like lucky to be somewhere. I think it's particularly true for women.
Mhm.
When we experience success, like this must be luck, this can't possibly be real. And I just remember starting to talk about it also on the blog that I kept at the time. And people were commenting like, yes, me too, me too, me too, me too. And I was like, oh, I'm not alone, And then the more I read about imposter syndrome and like, everything that sort of plays into it, the more I started to realize it was kind of this illusion and that
Mhm.
that I was a story I was telling myself. And so that coupled with continuing to get jobs and work and be invited to speak at conferences and win awards, like over time, I was like, okay, this is real.
Uh-huh.
This isn't going to just go away tomorrow. Like I do have talent. I have wisdom to share. Like this is all real. And I created this, and it's not something I should feel ashamed of or downplay. Like I
Mhm.
need to stand in my power. And that really happened in the last 4 years, believe it or not. Like
No, I believe it.
it took me a long time, but I feel like I'm finally there. I mean, I still have those moments where like I'll have an interview with a really famous person, or, something really amazing will happen in my career. And I will feel this, like,
Mhm.
who am I? What am I doing here? Moment. But it's really not like every day like it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Beautifully said. Lisa, you do a lot of things. You wear a lot of
Mm.
hats. You're an artist, you're an author, you're an activist, you're a teacher adjunct. You work with brands or license your art. You work with partners to create products like the new, the Live Your Values deck or newer. You're a collector. You have a store. Um, okay, big question. How do you manage it all? Because
Um,
honestly, from the outside, I look at you and I go, wow. I mean, I get that a lot from people. How do you get everything done? But I look at you and I'm like, really? How does she get everything done?
well, and then on top of that, I'm a cyclist and I race
Right.
bikes, and I have this very full life outside of art and my
Mhm.
business. So the first thing I want to say is that I don't necessarily manage it all very well all of the time, and that's not something that most people see, because that would be like a messy story to tell every day. Um, I mean, on the surface, I sort of managed somehow to get all my deadlines done, and to, continue to put my work into the world. But it's not without a lot of work and thought on how to actually scale that back, and or how to manage it in a, in a in a way that allows me more breathing room. And part of the problem is I'm one of those people who likes to, I was explaining this to my friend Lindsay last night, that she's like, what are you grappling with right now? And I was like, we always have these really deep conversations. And I was
I
like,
love it.
what I'm grappling with is this idea that I'm super passionate. I love to, um, like if I get an idea, I want to execute it. And I feel fear just like the next person, but I'm able to really plow through and get things done and like make ideas come to life. And while I love that, because, when I was, before we started, or maybe I don't even know if it was before we started recording or after we started recording, but like I was mentioning to you earlier that like I used to be this person who was very I don't know, insecure
Mhm.
about putting anything into the world. Like, and I'm now this person who's like, I have an idea, I want to execute it. And so, I've got ideas about all kinds of things, and I love teaching, and I get feedback that I'm good at it, and I like speaking, and I have feedback that I'm good at it, and I like illustrating. Like, I want to do all of it. I also want to give back to the world. Things pull at my heartstrings. I just founded a nonprofit. Like, I'm doing all the things. And that's all really great because I love all the things. But at the end of the day, it's too much, right? And
Mhm.
I'm one person, and I have a team, which I'll talk about in a second. So, but holding all of that managing all of that has become really hard. And so I am working with a coach right now to try to figure out like what is a feasible amount of work for me to do in all of the areas that bring me
Right.
joy, and how can I stagger them, and how can I be realistic and have realistic expectations about what I can accomplish in a period of time, and how can I put more boundaries around that, both by saying no to really precious opportunities that come my way, and also doing a better job of like staggering things and, you know, all the things that we do to try to manage our time. I am a pretty good like focused worker.
Mm-hmm.
I probably put in too many hours in a day. And
How many hours do you typically work?
I start work at 9 and I end at 5, but I often do work at night.
Okay.
And I like to brag at different periods of my life that, you know, I've stopped doing that, but it always creeps back in, especially when I'm super busy. I am married to somebody who also has a really demanding, very exciting job, and she also finds herself working sometimes at night. So it's kind of easy to be like, oh, you know, no Netflix for us tonight. Or let's meet in the basement in front of the TV at 8:30 once we've, you know, put in a couple hours after dinner. I also have the great privilege of making enough money to have 2 full-time, well-paid employees, and 1 half-time contractor who does strategy for me. So I have a head of operations and I have a head of retail and product development, and then a head of strategy who works for me part-time. And then I have a part-time kind of like person who comes in to help ship when my retail person and my operations person are overwhelmed with shipping, because they also do packing and shipping. So that has been a game changer for me. Delegating, learning to trust other people, hiring really smart women in their 40s who do not aspire to be me, just want to support my business, and are find joy in their jobs and are, you know, creatively and intellectually stimulated by the work. I just feel so grateful.
It is a game changer to find the right people and be able to afford it. Absolutely.
Exactly. So that's been really amazing. I feel like, you know, I asked this very question to somebody on my own podcast last week, and we were talking about how it's a work in progress. It's like, there's never enough time to do all the things you want. People are always surprised that I sleep 8 hours a night. I am very organized and efficient. And, you know, if I turned my computer around right now, you would see a complete disaster on my work table, but I'm an artist. So I like have also learned to let go of the messes and really focus on what's on my plate in the present moment and a few days out, and stay focused on what I have to accomplish in the short term, while sort of also kind of planning the long term. And so far that's worked for me. I don't know that I will ever be a person who has complete work-life balance until maybe I'm retired, and I don't even know if that will ever happen. And so I'm starting to, I really want to have enough downtime and relaxation and time on my bike to feel spaciousness. But I also want to allow myself to do all the things, because I am at this time in my life where I have a ton of energy and passion. And I also don't want to fight it too much, because it brings me life, you know?
Right.
And we have things.
Yeah, we have these, I think, sometimes outmoded or even patriarchal ideas of what work-life balance is supposed to look like. We've been talking a lot about that in our house, and and just my husband has a regular job, so he works for a nonprofit, so he has a lot of time off, a lot of paid time off. And he always makes fun of me. He's like, today is a holiday. I'm like, for you.
It is exactly what you're talking about.
For you. And he's like, yes, for the rest of the world. I'm like, maybe not. But that idea of what is the fluidity of that and the spaciousness. And for me, it's that sense of not having too many appointments and not rushing. I just want rushing is the thing that I'm trying to walk away from.
Yeah. The squeeze, because your work suffers. It's like,
and your soul suffers.
Your soul suffers. I I don't mind having a lot to do every day. I just want time to do all of the things that are on my plate.
And
I don't
enjoy it.
necessarily need to stare at the ceiling or, you know, take an hour-long lunch break. You know, I just want, yeah, that spaciousness is exactly how you're describing it. That's sort of, you know, for me, what I'm trying to go for right now.
Yeah, and it's hard to build in. I found myself rushing before our interview. I'm like, oh wait, I need tea. Oh wait, I didn't put my mic in. You know, da, da, da. And it's
Yeah.
like, all right, okay, well, it's a goal. It's an
Exactly.
intention.
Work in progress.
It's a work in progress. So you've done a number of collaborations. You collaborate with big brands, but you also collaborate with just, you know, people like you and I. And you just released the Live Your, or recently released the Live Your Values deck, which is beautiful. And I'm really enjoying working with it. So how do you decide who to collaborate with? That's a big question for creatives. You know, I used to collaborate with people out of I'm not good enough and I need you. And that was almost always a disaster.
That is definitely something that's been part of my past and that I'm fighting to this day. So I've gotten to the point in my career where I get a lot of inquiries from folks who want to do projects with me. The Live Your Values deck is actually something I pitched to Chronicle. I've been working with Chronicle Books, who published the deck, for years. I've worked with Simon and Schuster as well, and I'm working with Workman now on another project, but I've worked with Chronicle, you know, on most of my titles. And my friend Andrea, who I made the deck with, came to me and was like, we are both lead these values-driven businesses. We had, you know, shared with each other that we had both done the values exercise where we, you know, the sorting exercise that the deck is based on, and that it was kind of life-changing for us. And that it was actually an idea that was kind of out in the world, and nobody held the copyright to it. So we were like, oh, we can take this idea and turn it into a cool product. So we pitched it to Chronicle, they acquired it, and that was that. And that's been the case for a couple projects I've done with them. Most of the time, however, companies come to me, big companies, small companies, individuals, and they say, we want to work with you on X, Y, or Z. So for the big brand stuff, I have an agent, and we talk a lot about at this time, like what money does this warrant? Because oftentimes they don't tell you what they want to pay you. They ask you to quote something. We can't get them to tell us what their budget is, you know. We have to quote something, which is just always scary, right? Because if you really want it, you don't want to quote it too high. And if, you know, you also don't want to undersell yourself. So there, you know, some of how I decide who to work with has to do with what is the brand? I mean, and do I share values with that brand? Or is there some connection? Like I'm signing on right now with a cycling company, which I can't talk about yet, because we haven't signed the dotted line, but like dream client, right? Because bikes are everything in my life. I did work last year with Method, great company. Like I've got another sporting goods company that I have some running shoes coming out with next year or later this year. You know, so it's like, how connected is what the company does to my own passions and interests? And, you know, so that's one consideration. It's like also money, let's face it. You know, I did some work with Amazon last year, and I'm working with Google right now. And a lot of it is like, oh, I can pay my salaries with this money, right? My employee salaries, like kind of a no-brainer, pretty easy work for the money. They want to actually hire an independent artist and work with her, instead of ripping off her artwork, you know. Yes.
There's a plus.
There's a plus. So much of it has to do with the timeline, like how much do I have on my plate already? And my coach is really helping me to figure out, like in a quarter, so say between January and the end of March, how much work can I feasibly handle? And I've been doing this long enough that I can usually, you know, I can now say like, you know, one large job or two medium jobs or whatever, right? And so we make an agreement about how much work I'm going to take on, so that if I get 3 or 4 inquiries, I can only take 1 or 2 of them. Because as we were just talking about, time is so important. And if I'm rushing to do too much work, you know, I'm going to be miserable. The work isn't going to be as strong. So all of those things kind of factor into who I work with. And, sometimes I know somebody and they're a friend and I'm not going to say no to this person. Or maybe sometimes I want to do the project, but I don't have time. So then the question becomes like, can they push it off into a later date? Like there's all kinds of negotiation that go on when people contact me and reach out to me. So yeah, there's no science to it. It's still like a crapshoot every single time. But and then I have to manage my time and time block my day to make sure that I'm attending to all the different projects that I'm working on. And sometimes I get in this place where I'm like, I never should have said yes to this. This is a terrible job. I should have known. And just recently, I declined 2 jobs that we were in pretty high in conversations, like almost ready to sign on the dotted line. And I bailed because I'm listening to my gut for the first time.
Mm.
And it used to be that if had had a long enough conversation with a company or a brand or a nonprofit,
Oh my God,
and,
yes.
and I had, even though I hadn't signed a contract, if I felt like I had taken too much of their time, or they sent me, $500 worth of samples of their product to try to woo me, that I felt this like obligation
Yes.
to like work with them. And in both of these cases, my gut was like, something is telling me, it's not even the people, it's not even the product. It's just like, something's telling me that this is too much, or this is not the right project for me. And I'm finally listened. And I had my agent reach out to 2 different clients in the last 2 weeks where we withdrew, and they were super cool about it. I think they understand. Also getting to contract was just taking forever with them. So I was starting to get cold feet, and I had other projects coming my way that were going to take my time. And I'm just so proud of myself because the old me never would have done that.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. My God, that sense of, and I think this is a woman thing. I don't know if it's a guy thing too, but that sense of obligation, like you've given me, we've talked, I've met you, you like
Yeah.
me, we laughed together, and now I
Yeah.
owe you.
Yep.
Yes, very much
Yes.
so. I
That's a
love that.
big one for me. And yeah, deep breaths. I'm even like having anxiety talking about it. But
Absolutely. I can feel it. I can feel
it's
it.
like I'm simultaneously like so relieved. So yeah.
Let's just go back for a second, just for a moment, if you would touch on that they say, how much would you charge moment versus this is how much our budget is. Because I know I used to do a ton of public speaking, and that was always a big moment of, oh my God, is this where I asked for my full rate? Do I want, all of that? And so what have you found, if anything helps? Is it your agent, you sort of discuss anything you might know about what this kind of company has on tap, or?
Yeah, exactly. So my agent works with well, there's a cadre of, now there's I think about 5 of us who are represented by him. There was more. People go in and out of the agency all the time. And so he has a lot of and all of us are pretty well known and work with big brands. And so he has a lot of experience. It's like, I think when you're an agent for, a pool of artists who are working for brands, you start over time, over a few years, to get a good idea of what brands can, like the kind of job it is, what brands are
Can
willing to
afford.
pay people. And I'm an influencer that is always very attractive to brands, that I might share the thing that I made with them. And it's often a separate part of the contract too, where I get paid to do social media. So that really helps. Sometimes Ryan, my agent's name is Ryan. Sometimes we're stumped. There's always that company or that job where we're like, they're big, but they're not that big. And what they're asking you to do is kind of like, I don't know. So then the question is, what would make you want to do this? Like, and if it's a brand that I feel really aligned with, I might be willing to do it for less money, kind of like lowball. But if it's a brand that I'm like, I just want to see what they say, and I'm not necessarily even that interested in working with them, or I wouldn't be crestfallen if this fell through, I might aim really high. And so I think only in one case in the last few years that I've worked with Ryan have we gotten no way can we afford you. But thank you. Most of the time they're either willing to say, would, counter or reduce the amount of work. Sometimes that
Okay.
helps to negotiate, or they extend the timeline so that I have more time. There's all these, as I mentioned, there's all these different ways that you can kind of negotiate. And sometimes it's just like, okay, I think it feels like it should be this, and we agree on a number, and then we put it out there, and then they have the opportunity to accept or decline. Sometimes you get lucky, and a company like this happened with Method. And actually, I got in contact with them before I signed with Ryan. So I was on my own at the time. I didn't have an agent. And they were like, how much would you charge for this? And I didn't actually know. I was really, I was excited, but I was like, I have no idea. And I said, well, what's your budget? And they told me something that was literally, I mean, 4 or 5 times what I would have asked for, to the point where I screamed when I got the email. And then that ended up increasing because they did more bottles of soap with me. And my wife comes running downstairs, like, what's wrong? And I was like crying. I was like, you're not
Oh.
gonna believe. And it was like the highest paid thing I had ever done and they wanted to license existing work. I didn't even have to really do anything. So that was a moment where I was like, it always pays to ask if they're willing to tell you, because with some of these big brands, and I've had that similar situation since then, where it's been pretty amazing. And then we often tack on a separate contract, like I said, for social media stuff, which can add more money. So yeah, it's an interesting process. And I'm finding that the more well-known I become and the more of a sort of like personality and kind of voice commodity I become, commodity, I hate that word, but like the more I'm able to ask for, which sometimes feels ridiculous for the amount of work I'm being paid. But I'll take it because I'm
That's the
late to
world.
this in my life. So I feel like I'm making up for lost time anyway. Yeah.
It's the world we live in. How do you feel about being on Instagram and being an influencer? I feel like in following you, I was banned from Instagram, so I'm not on Instagram anymore for saying vagina. But I feel like I've gotten the sense sometimes that you needed to take a break, or that you don't have a completely at peace relationship with Instagram. I don't know that anybody does, but
I don't. Yeah. And if anybody does, they need to write a book. Yeah. So I still struggle, and Instagram has changed so much. Like
yes.
the algorithm has changed, what gets featured and exposed to more people has changed. So I went through a period where my Instagram exploded, and I was getting a ton of engagement, a ton of likes. I knew exactly what to post to grab people's attention. I was talking more and more. I was telling more and more personal stories, which people were connecting with. I was talking more and more about politics. And, while I didn't say vagina, I definitely said some things that were
don't say vagina.
And, my following was really engaged with that content. There is only so much of that you can do before you burn out. And also before you feel creatively kind of, I've never done anything or put anything out there that made me feel like I was selling out. I do have always, even in the moments where I've been posting often and, talking about things that I knew were going to get engagement, never has it been inauthentic. Like I definitely am, somebody who, when I post a thought or a message, it's something that I really believe in and have personal experience with, which is why I often couple my artwork with a personal story. And my book, You Will Leave a Trail of Stars, is kind of a compilation of a lot of that. So, but when you're doing that kind of like heavy hitting, personal, even controversial content, it can be exhausting, both to create it and think about it, but also to interact with people who are reacting to it. And so I have really gotten pretty burned out. Like I used to post every day. I haven't posted in a few days now. I haven't even thought about it. And I actually feel so liberated from Instagram right now. Um, and anyways, even though I'm still, when I do post that stuff, it doesn't get the same likes or engagement as it used to, because the algorithm has
Mhm.
changed. I think people also get burned out on certain kinds of content and move on.
Mhm.
Um, I still have a very devoted following. And because I have, 450,000 followers, I still have a critical mass of people paying attention to my work, wanting to buy things when I post about them, all the things. I think if I was, somebody who had a much smaller following and the algorithm had changed, it would feel really hard. And I know it does
Mhm.
feel really hard for a lot of artists. I did just hear the CEO talk about how they're going to open you up to 3 options now, where you can view things. You can view your favorites. You can mark certain accounts as your favorites and view those only. You can view things how they're in the current algorithm, or you can view things chronologically again. And they haven't, I think they're probably going to slowly release that new feature. But I'm looking forward to that, not just for my own consumption, but to allow other people to consume content in the way that they want. So I think that Facebook and Instagram are listening. Um, and that's great. I just have started to let go of attaching any sense of value or worth to my Instagram engagement. And I think I did for a long period of time.
Sure.
It's hard not
It's
to.
hard not to. It's engineered to make you do
That's
that. And
right.
then when you're having success with it, it feels good.
It feels great.
It feels
And I've
great.
talked to so many artists about this, and we are all going through this shift.
Mhm.
And so I made this commitment in 2022 that I'm just going to post when I feel like it and post what I feel like posting, even if I think it's going to get like a dribble of likes. I just want, and I'm feeling nostalgic for that, because when I first joined Instagram, that's what it was like for
Yeah.
me before I even had a following. It wasn't fraught with all this. Are people going to pay attention to this? Are people
Mhm.
going to like it? Is this going to get a lot of likes? Like, I'm starting to not care, and genuinely not care. And I do feel like that's a privilege, because I already have a lot of followers. So not very many likes for me is like huge for other
Somebody else.
people,
Sure.
and I get that. But I'm just glad I joined Instagram at a time when, my work plus Instagram was like a match made in heaven. I make work that's was at for a time Instagram friendly, messages, bright colors, graphic. Um, my voice really came through. And now what is Instagram friendly has changed. And so I don't know that I'm ready to change with it, or that I want to. I'm just going to keep making art and putting it out there. So.
Beautiful. Speaking of voice, I love this book,
Oh,
Live
thank
Your,
you.
Find Your Artistic Voice. I have lots and lots of marks in it and underlines and dog-eared. I ran out of my little flags that I usually
Oh,
use when
wow.
it really speaks to something that I have been interested in for so many years, is how do we develop our voice more, because I work primarily with writers, but this is a book that works for writers and all creatives, and I think of any discipline. I just really love it so much. And I wanted to ask you, what are the major elements of an artistic voice?
I think that a lot of people who either, I can't speak for going to art school because I never went to art school, but I think a lot of people who want to be artists think somehow, especially in this day and age where we're so flooded with imagery and trends
Mhm.
and how we think our work should look, or the kind of work we should be making, or the subject matter that we should be making. We think it should mimic what's on trend in order for it to sell. And my argument in the book is really, your voice is your truth. Ultimately, if you're copying other people, or, we all, and I talk about this in the book too, like we all reference other people, whether we're a
Mhm.
writer or an artist, a visual artist. Like, we have influences. We wouldn't be artists and writers if we didn't have influences, if we didn't fall in love with an artist or a group of artists or a genre of art or a genre of writing, right? We consume that because it helps us find our own voice. But ultimately, we need to move away from our influences. And that comes from, making, first of all, practicing So making marks on the proverbial canvas every single day. And the more you do that, even if you're sort of mimicking or copying at first, the more you do that, the more your way of doing it, you know, which is like ingrained in your DNA, the more that emerges. And you know, it's like the more also we come from the place of telling our own story, our own truth, right? Like whether, as I say in the book, it's kind of like, um, you know, a lot of people think what in order to have an artistic voice or tell a story or have truth, that your truth needs to be some big profound thing, like your art is about oppression or your art is about the abuse you suffered as a child. And while that might be what your work is about, and that's amazing, it might also just be that you love, you know, drawing flowers and like, or, you know, in my case, it's like, I love shapes and symbols and like, I love an imaginary grid, and pretty much all my work is like very organized. And maybe that, you know, if you dug deeper, you would probably find out that that's my reaction to like chaos, right? That I'm trying, you know, my story and my truth is that I'm trying to create some sense of control in a world that feels very chaotic and whatever. So the closer we can get to what is my truth and what are all the aspects of my truth, and like pouring those onto whatever medium we choose, whether it's figurative and literal, or it's not literal and abstract, it doesn't matter, right? That we're channeling our own truth. And that's a big, big, big part of your voice. That gets neglected. I think people think of your voice as your style, and your style is definitely a huge part of your voice, but it's not the whole story, right? It's not everything. And your subject matter, what you choose to make and draw and paint, and what that's about is just as important as the style that you render it in. And that I think is hard for some people because they think, well, if I just make things that don't have any meaning, but are, you know, in this sort of abstract style, you know, that's okay. And I guess that's okay, but like the more we can dig into our feelings and our histories and our passions and our interests, the more interesting our work is going to be, the more layered and nuanced it's going to be.
You write about in Find Your Artistic Voice how you did that work at a particular point in time to dig through and find those sort of deeper impulses. Do you still have to keep doing that?
Yes, I mean, I'm at a place right now, I'm feeling a little stuck. And I talk about this in the book that we not only hit one impasse, we hit many, you know, any
Definitely.
creative person, you'll spend sometimes years in a certain flow where it seems like, yeah, you know, we have these awkward moments always as part of the creative process, but where subject matter and style and execution and skill and all that stuff that are elements of your voice, like all of those things seem to flow out of you. And then you think, oh, I've got it now, you know, until I'm 90 years old and on my deathbed, I've got it. And then, you know, one day you wake up and like, you don't got it anymore. And you have to, you either, you know, sometimes it's because you're burned out. Sometimes it's because you've fleshed out that particular way of working to the
Mhm.
point where you're actually bored with it and you need to try something new. I'm not really sure what's going on with me right now, but I'm feeling like I need, and I'm trying to build in more time in my schedule to experiment and not have that experiment have to lead to anything.
Mm.
Um, and just really absorb the pleasure and the experience of making so that new things can come forth for me, that I can make new discoveries and try new things, because I've been doing things the same way for a while now and I'm ready to move on, but I don't know what the next thing is. And so I've been through this so many times in so many iterations that I know not to freak out. Like, fortunately, again, I'm lucky and privileged to have a lot of people come to me and want to pay me to make work in the way that I know how, and that's very fast and easy for me. Um, and so I can make a living while also taking a kind of creative break in my personal work to figure out what's next. Eventually, that personal work kind of morphs into my professional work. So I kind of think about having like two buckets, like the stuff I'm really good at, where my voice is really solid and I can execute easily. And when I do it, I'm in a flow because it is pretty easy for me. And then the bucket where I'm constantly challenging myself to learn new things and to try new things. And whether it's a new mindset or a new material or a new way of doing something. And I feel like if I didn't have the challenge bucket in my back pocket at all times, I would get really bored.
So
So
what's the
even when
challenge?
even when I'm in a space of flow, even when, I always like to be challenging myself a little bit.
So tell me this week, what will it look like to spend time in the challenge bucket?
Okay, so in the beginning of January, I started keeping a sketchbook again. And in 2017, I got an iPad and I've been drawing on Procreate, which is a digital drawing program. And it has literally changed my practice. I love digital drawing. I'm really good at it. It's very fast for me. It's kind of become my sweet spot. And I abandoned my sketchbook because now even when I'm sketching or doing personal work, it's on the iPad. So I also have found myself, and I know this is true for a lot of my artist friends who've gone on a similar path, we miss the tactile nature of paint and paper and the messiness and the fact that you can't undo every time you do something that doesn't look right, right? It challenges you in a different way. So I committed to a sketchbook practice. The first few days of January, I went off without a hitch, and then I got really busy doing client work, and I haven't touched it in a few days. And a couple days ago, I went back to this spread that I had started a few days before that, and I was working on it, and it wasn't coming out the way that I wanted, and I'm not liking it, and I felt anxiety, and I was like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety because I'm so used to making things to show the world. What if I just stayed in this spot of discomfort and kept working on this spread, and then especially if I still don't like it, or if it doesn't end up being anything special, I just turned the page and started another spread without taking a picture of it and sharing it with the world. Like, I don't have to share everything. Not everything has to be perfect. Not everything has to be fast. I can spend a week on one sketchbook spread. I don't have to do one a day. Nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention. Cut yourself some slack. And that's literally the conversation I had with myself the other day. And I feel like now that I've relaxed into it, I'm having so much more fun. So the challenging part for me is actually the mindset around experimenting and letting go of this looks cool or this doesn't look cool. Every now and again, I'll make something that looks cool in my sketchbook and I'll probably share it, but there'll probably be lots of experiments in there that are kind of a hot mess, and that's okay. And that's the thing. It's like I preach that to my students. I preach it to everybody I speak to. And yet I found myself like not holding myself to the same expectation. So we can be so much harder on ourselves than we are on other people.
I also think it's part of being a professional creative. What I have found is one of the things that leads to burnout, and I've been struggling with burnout for the last couple of years. Part of it's the pandemic for sure,
Yeah.
but part of it is that constant need to produce,
Yep.
and to meet the deadline or to share the content or to be on social media, whatever form it takes to keep the business growing.
Yep.
And that starts to overshadow any sense of play or personal voice
Yes.
or personal
Yeah.
work. And I'm really working on that myself.
Yeah.
I got a ways to go.
My team and I, we had a day-long retreat, our second day back or third day back in January, and like a in-house retreat. And my strategist, Les, who's a great facilitator, led us through all of these activities. And we decided like our word for the year, or our goal for the year, our like brand pillar for the year was play. And that I really wanted to play more in my art practice, but they want to have fun doing their jobs, and I was like, yes, this is it. And we got to check in with each other about that because it's so easy to make those goals and it's so easy to forget them.
I try to read first thing in the morning, and I often forget, but read first thing in the morning, those things that I'm trying to learn, like to have better boundaries with students and to show up for my students as much as they show up for themselves, instead of being the one who's like, hi, can I do it for you? Can I chew your food and throw it up in your mouth so you can?
Yes.
Oh, well, two last questions. You've been a serious athlete for a lot of your life. Do you think that influences your creativity? I'm a big believer that it does for me, but I just wonder if that's true for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a couple different ways. Like, I think that and I happen to, I used to swim
Mhm.
competitively. I haven't swam in a long time, but now I'm on my bike, and long bike rides and long swims give you, and I think this is true for a lot of endurance sports, you're spending a lot of time doing the thing. And even when you're with people doing the thing, you're still in your own head. And
Mhm.
I get some of my best ideas when I'm in that liminal space and when I'm being so present with the road and where I am in that moment. Because if I'm not, I will crash. Just running ideas through my head, paying attention to the road at the same time. And, sometimes I'm even bored on a bike ride. So I'll force myself to think about, like,
Mhm.
hey, what am I going to make tomorrow when I go to the studio, or, whatever. So I think it really helps open me up to ideas. It's kind of like when you're laying at bed at night or in the shower or on a long airplane ride, you have these moments where you can't do anything else. So your mind, goes really crazy. I also think the discipline required
Mhm.
for at least being an endurance athlete or being really good at something and the way you have to sort of keep showing up and keep practicing is really good. you know um Working those literal muscles is also good for kind of like strengthening the mental muscle to stick with things that are hard or uncomfortable in your creative practice. And I do credit my kind of very athletic life and my discipline around athletics with like strengthening my grit to show up in my creative practice when I'm uncomfortable, when I don't know how to do something, when I have to learn something new, all that stuff. So they feel super complementary to me, and I'm really grateful for them. And to be honest, and this isn't necessarily an answer to your question, but I also love having this thing that uses very different parts of my body and my being. And I also have all of these friends that I ride bikes with, and they all know I'm an artist, and they all come to my shop and shop during the holidays. And, but none of them are artists. My cycling friends are all, physical therapists and retired teachers. And, they are, I don't want to say regular people because artists are regular people too, but they're not artists. And I love hanging out with them because I don't have to talk about what I do for a living, and I don't have to
Yes.
kvetch about things. Like, I can just be with them as, one of them, and I'm just a regular person to them. Like, I'm so well known in my art life, and people have expectations of me, and that often feels like a lot of pressure. And when I'm on my bike, I'm actually a very mediocre cyclist. I'm probably faster than the average 54-year-old woman, but like, I'm decent, but I'm not that great. I will never be famous for it. I love it, but it's this thing that I'm just regular at. And I have just like these regular friends who also do it. And that brings me so much joy. It's such a relief from this life I have as an artist, especially an artist on social media. So um I feel like it complements my life, you know, in so many ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. That's exactly what I experienced with running. So last question that I love to ask people is, what do you want to learn next, Lisa?
Mm. I am learning and want to continue to learn um, how to, you know, manage this like constant source of angst for me, which is I want to do all the things, but I don't have time.
Mm.
And as I get older, I want to settle into um I want to settle into this place, and I'm experiencing it more and more, like that big aha the other day that I had around my sketchbook. Like,
Mhm.
you don't have to turn this into anything special. Like, spending parts of my day just um doing something that has no pressure attached to it. I'm sure you can relate to this.
Totally. I'm
I have
so right
spent
there right now. You're just like, I'm like, oh my God, we're having the same exact
I know.
experience right now.
I have worked so hard to build my career.
Yeah.
I have said yes. I was a yes person for so long. I have been so disciplined. I have showed up. I have worked hard. I have done all the things. Yes, I also have a lot of privilege that has helped me get here. But I'm here. and and I'm I don't need to make as much of an effort to as I used to, and getting off the hamster wheel is really hard. Like I think
Mhm.
we so easily get wrapped up in old behavior while, like this mindset that I better say yes to this opportunity because if I don't, it's going to be bad karma, or,
They're all
you know,
going to go away,
is
or
it going to go away, or, I owe this person something that what,
Mhm.
we were talking about earlier, and really letting go and just being like, I don't owe anybody anything. And again, this is something that I preach constantly. And partly the reason I preach it is because I need to hear it myself. Like, um, this is my life, my time, and I deserve to have some of it dedicated to doing things that don't feel like a lot of pressure. When I first started writing on my cycling team, a lot of my teammates were like, you should race. And I was like, oh no. And here's why. It's not that I'm afraid of losing or not being good at it. It's because I have so much pressure in my career. Cycling is the one thing that and now, meanwhile, a couple of years ago, I discovered gravel cycling, and now I am doing gravel races. But what I love about gravel races is it's not about winning. It's not even about your time. It's about the experience. So I found a way to race and participate in gravel
Mhm.
cycling that doesn't feel like a lot of pressure. Sometimes it's nerve wracking because it's slightly dangerous, but it's not the same pressure as I feel in my career. And I want to have more of that, like more time and activity that feels genuinely joyful, but without the pressure. Because my work is joyful, but there's pressure attached to it. There are deadlines.
Absolutely.
I have to get things done. They need to be
Performance.
approved. It's performance. I
Yeah.
think I guess I want to learn. Thank you for helping me put language to this. I think I want to learn how to spend some of my time not performing, um, and
Beautiful.
not setting goals, just being. And even the it's like even reading books has goals attached to it for me. Like I'll be like, I'm gonna read one book a week, and I'm an avid reader, and I manage somehow to find time before I go to bed. But like I feel like that is again creating expectations and stress that I don't need. So it's a work in progress, but that's really what I want to learn. I want to learn how to chill during periods of my day. Yeah.
I love it. I completely relate. I started running later in life. I think I was 53, 54, and I got into it and I was racing and not because I'm fast or
Yeah.
good or anything,
Yeah.
but because it was fun.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit. The book came out during the pandemic and the Trump bullshit, and it was so hard and didn't do what I thought it would do. Although I'm very grateful for what it did do, and I stopped wanting to push myself running. And my husband, hi Bob, I love you. He keeps saying things. He listens to all the podcast episodes, you guys. He's like, like, come on, come on. And I'm like, I don't want to push myself in one more thing. I want to find the joy again in running, and the same
Yeah.
thing in making art. And so I'm with you. I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, where's the joy? Where's the joy? Where's the chill vibe? That vibe where I'm like, I'm
Not
so excited
performing,
to do this. Yeah,
not
exactly.
performing. That's the key.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, I'm so delighted to spend this time with you. You're
Yes, likewise.
wonderful. Your work is beautiful and wonderful, and I'm just so thankful that you opened up and took us into your world for a little while.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Jen. It was really great.